Welcome, Mason Ecology Club. I wanted to try something a little different here. We're going to try a PowerPoint presentation. I'm using Zoom to record this. First time I ever tried it. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Today, I wanted to also start with our standard start, which is what is ecology? It's a study of the interaction of living things in the environment they live in, which is not the same as environmentalism, which is concern for environmental protection. Today I want to talk about pandemics. We're in the middle of one right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm sure people are wondering what's going on, and there are some people that are anxious and scared, and there are some people that are probably enjoying being out of school and staying at home and being close to your family. But you probably have some questions and are wondering about what's going on with the pandemic. Now, I'm not going to really talk about COVID specifically today. I'm going to talk about what pandemics are in general, and then how do they spread and who do they affect. You can see on the background of this, the background of the slide here is a population graph of Europe for a pandemic that happened about 700 years ago, called the Black Death or the Plague, bubonic plague specifically. And then over there on the side over here is a micrograph of an E. coli bacteria, which is a very common bacteria which occasionally makes foodborne epidemics, not pandemics, but it's an example of a microorganism, a very small organism. So, what is a pandemic? You might have heard epidemic, outbreak, endemic, pandemic. Endemic is a disease that's kind of always there. It doesn't really cause a lot of problems. It just stays in the background. Rabies is an example of this. There are animals with rabies in most areas, but only every once in a while does it flare up and start getting spread and become a problem. An epidemic is an outbreak of the disease. In other words, an outbreak means a lot of cases of it. It's something that people start noticing because there's enough of them. And an epidemic is a disease, as you can see right here. This one's showing one in northern South America. It breaks out in an area, but it stays confined to that area. In a pandemic, shown over here in this last little globe, pandemic is when a disease starts spreading all over the world and gets a little bit out of control. All right, so how do diseases spread? Scientists call the thing that spreads a disease a vector. Now, what a vector is in math is just an arrow. It's showing something going from one point to another. And that's exactly what a vector in a disease is. It's how the disease gets from one thing to another. Now, often diseases are spread on by various means. And insects are one way that some of the most famous diseases get spread. Mosquitoes spread malaria and yellow fever. Ticks spread Lyme disease, and there's another big one, a Rocky Mountain spotted fever from deer and between people. What happens is that various things hold on to microorganisms, whether that's fungus, virus, or bacteria, and then move it from one place to another. But it's not always a living thing that is a vector, is a method of transmitting. Sometimes it's something like dust or water that can spread a disease. So those can be the vectors. Scientists always try to figure out where the vector is, because if you can figure out how it's spreading, you can also figure out how to shut it down. So in particular in the coronavirus, what you're going to see is spread by coughing and sneezing. Um, over here on the side, these are high-speed photographs that scientists take with strobe photography, try to figure out what happens when a human being coughs and sneezes. And what happens is very fine droplets go out at high speed and propel sometimes several feet. You see down here, this one down here, this little picture shows how sometimes light particles float away like a cloud, and then other times heavy particles go down and land. If you've ever talked to somebody that is sort of spitting in your face a little bit, they say it, don't spray it. It is natural because your mouth and your nose have got mucus and saliva and other droplets in it. When you talk, you're blowing things out, you're blowing breath out, and it's kind of natural to expel these things. So the issue is these droplets then have, let me see, you know, in the background here is a micrograph of mucus. Mucus, people call them boogers. Mucus is just a gel that your body creates. And everybody knows about mucus in your nose, boogers, but it's also in your lungs, it's in your eyeballs. You have a layer of mucus across your eyeballs, keeps your eyeballs wet so they don't dry out. It's all throughout your body. Mucus is a very important material that a body manufactures to preserve tissues. And the mucus in the nose is actually there for a particular purpose. It serves as a filter. So when you breathe in dust or other small particles that are in the air, pollution is another thing that a lot of people breathe in, smog, smoke, things like that. Anything that's airborne, when you breathe it in, what the mucus does is it coats the inside of your nose, and it acts like, I don't know if you've ever seen sticky paper that are used to catch flies, but basically it's the particles stick to it, and then you're supposed to expel it rather than letting it go down into your lungs. So I know people think boogers are gross, but boogers are actually a protection system on you that traps things and stops them from going in. But in the case of coronavirus, what's happening is those virus particles are in the mucus. And then when you cough or sneeze, little pieces of it, tiny little pieces of it come out in a cloud. And they can land on surfaces. And the thing about mucus is it also helps preserve some things like a virus. It's sort of like, it's like a little home for the virus so that it can survive a little bit longer. And these are the kinds of things that we're studying and we're trying to figure out, in particular about coronavirus. But we know these are problems with the annual flu epidemic, which happens every year, and colds. And there's other types of diseases that can be spread this way. This is why people are being recommended to wear masks, because what you're doing with a mask is you're putting a shield right here so that when you sneeze, it captures it and it doesn't spread it to all the people around you. People think you're wearing a mask to protect yourself, and medical doctors are. Doctors and nurses in hospitals are wearing masks so that they don't inhale disease particles. And what they're asking us to wear masks so that if we have it, we won't spread it as easily. The difference between a big cloud of it putting material all over the environment versus keeping it on your face. All right. Now, we've talked in Ecology Club before. Pandemics, epidemics, diseases, they're not limited to human beings. We have lots and lots of diseases that happen all the time. They've been happening all through history, and they don't just happen to people. They don't just happen to animals. They happen to plants also. And some examples of diseases in the past is there's a current pandemic of a disease. It's a fungus-borne disease. Fungus is the vector. This fungus is wiping out bananas and could very well wipe out all the bananas in the world. Back in 1950, this has happened before. The banana that you used to get in the store before 1950 was a variety called Gros Michel, which means Big Mike. And a virus swept through the entire world. A banana pandemic was what it was. And it went through and it wiped out all of the gross material. You can't buy that banana anymore, anywhere. It doesn't exist. I don't know if it's been saved by scientists in some lab somewhere, if it could ever be brought back. But for now, it's gone. Right now, we eat a banana variety called the Cavendish banana, and it's being severely impacted by a fungus, which is in Indonesia and a few other places. I can't remember where it is, but it's spreading. And bananas are grown in Africa, South America, in tropical locations. And once it gets into an area, it spreads through because every banana is the same genetically. Imagine walking into a classroom and every child in the classroom looked like a twin. They were absolutely identical, no difference genetically between them and anybody else. That's what we did with bananas. Every banana is a clone. It's genetically identical, which means they're particularly susceptible to pandemics, because what happens is any disease is going to hit every organism in that, or every banana in this case, every banana plant the same. There aren't going to be some banana plants that just happen to have slightly different variation in their genetics that makes them be able to survive the pandemic. All of them will be wiped out. So this is particularly bad. Now, there's other pandemics going on. I'm not sure if coral bleaching actually qualifies as a pandemic, because we're not absolutely sure what's causing it. But if they find that the reason why coral reefs go from these colorful, vibrant, full of life environments to these gray, bleached, dead environments, just like dead rocks, they might find out that there is an organism that is causing some of this. Could just be pollution. Pollution is not a pandemic. Pandemic is a disease that is caused by some sort of microorganism. So coral bleaching is a widespread problem that's killing a lot of coral. Is it a pandemic? Maybe. Very famous pandemic was a thing called the Irish potato famine. This is back in the 1800s. The country of Ireland, almost entirely, people ate potatoes. That was most of the diet of most people, was potatoes. And a blight came in, which I think is a fungus. It could have been a bacteria. I've seen the name of it, but it didn't say whether it was a bacteria or a fungus. It came in and just wiped all of the potatoes out. And you went from a nation that was eating potatoes all the time to suddenly a nation that had no food. That's why a lot of Irish immigrated, a lot of them to America in the 1800s. That's why we have a large Irish American population. The Irish potato famine, a lot of people died during that one because they starved to death. Now, the honeybees have been hammered by several pandemics in the last few years. These pandemics are, in their case, these diseases that they get are being transmitted by little tiny mites. So it's sort of like a tick, but on a really tiny scale. A tick that would be about this big on the back of the honeybee. I'm hoping you can see my little arrow. It's a small little smaller than the honeybee. It's also a mite, I think, is an insect technically, but they get infected with these diseases and they die in large numbers. The honeybee population has collapsed several times. There's another one going on right now that's called colony collapse disorder. They're not actually sure what's causing it. They're thinking that it could be some of the pesticides, which are chemicals, weed killers that you use to kill weeds. There's a particular type of weed killer nowadays that is called a neonicotinoid, which means it acts like nicotine in tobacco and it kills weeds. Well, they think that the bees are going out and eating out of the flowers of weeds that have been sprayed with these chemicals and bringing the toxin back to their hive. So if that's the case, it's not a pandemic, it's not a disease. We don't know what's causing this disease, but the honeybees have been nailed by 3 different diseases in the last 15 years. We're very concerned about it. So, pandemics. What can we do about a pandemic? Well, we want to slow the spread. Then you want to trace the spread. Who brought it where? And then you want to isolate and quarantine people so that if they are sick, they will not be able to spread the disease to other people. That's the main reason why you isolate, so you won't spread it to other people. But you also isolate so you won't be in contact with people that have it and you won't get it too. And then you need to stay healthy. And that means getting plenty of sleep and eating healthy food so that your immune system will be able to handle it. And then eventually we'll develop a vaccine. All a vaccine is a vaccine is what happens when a human gets a disease, when they recover from it. It's because the body's immune system, which is sort of like a shield system that protects the body from diseases, it has gone in and looked at the disease and figured out this is a bad thing, and it has mounted a defense, uh, antibodies that the body releases so that when the disease comes again, it shields the cells and it shields the body from being able to catch the disease. Humans developed a system called vaccination, which is basically tricking your body into thinking it had the disease so that it mounts an immune response. What that means is it's ready for the disease. The beauty of vaccines is you get the immune response, which means you can't get the disease anymore without ever having to actually go through the disease. You don't ever have to actually be sick. You get the benefit of having been sick. Now you can't get sick again without getting sick. And vaccines are something that Benjamin Franklin wrote about. That was the first vaccine, which was for smallpox. And he lost one of his sons to smallpox because he didn't get him vaccinated. And he wrote about how much he regretted not vaccinating the children. Back then, vaccines had a chance to kill you too, because they were kind of giving you a low grade of the disease. Nowadays, we've figured out how to make vaccines that don't actually give you the disease. You're not going to get sick from the shot. Your body is going to think that it has the virus or the bacteria, and it's going to mount an immune response. So, isolate and quarantine. I know that's a lot of work right now, and there's a lot of people very concerned about this. At some point in time, we're all going to go back out into the world. And for a while, we're going to look at each other and think, are you sick? Are you going to make me sick? It's going to be something that we're going to have to live with for a while until we get the vaccine. Once we get vaccinated, we can stop worrying about this and we can go back to life as normal. Now, I hope you all are staying safe, and I hope you all are not worrying about this too much. What you're going through is crazy, but it's not unique. It's just a bad time right now that we have to go through this right now. My parents went through polio epidemics, pandemics probably. There's been outbreaks of cholera. There was a massive flu pandemic in 1918 called the Spanish flu. That was very bad. That was much worse than the coronavirus, the COVID-19 that we're going through right now. This will be over sometime soon. And one thing that I'm very encouraged by is that scientists are coming together all over the world to solve this problem. It's actually pretty amazing. And the things that we're learning that are going to help us solve COVID-19 and fight the coronavirus back are going to be the kinds of things that are going to also help us cure cancer and be ready quickly if new pandemics arise in the future. When we get through this, we're going to be much more resilient and much more able to fight off the next pandemic. And hopefully we'll also learn tools to help us go out in the world and fight the pandemics that are happening to our animal and plant friends. So stay safe. Good luck. Until next time.